and welcome to Existentialist Talk. I'm your host, Sandy Zelek. Today we're going to be discussing two movies, The Truman Show and Stranger Than Fiction. We're going to look at Franz Kafka's and Albert Camus' philosophies that are in these movies. Our guests today are John Martin, who knows The Truman Show like the back of his hand, and Amy Randall, who's certainly no stranger to Stranger Than Fiction.
Well, why don't we start off by defining existentialism?
Okay, you can do the honors.
Existentialism is the philosophy that emphasizes the existence of the individual person as a free and responsible human being. They determine their own development through acts of free will.
Yes, but there are many different types of existentialism. Camus, for example, believed that nothing really matters, so you shouldn't really try to do anything. Kafka, on the other hand, said you had to be isolated to learn anything.
Right, Camus was an absurdist. Absurdism is one of the main types of existentialism that was displayed in The Truman Show. Like when the show's producer in the movie talks to Truman and tells him that he has nothing to live for in the life, the same that he has nothing to live for in real life. Or it would be the same thing, really.
Well, since Joe got the ball rolling, why don't we start with his area of expertise? What key existentialist points do you think The Truman Show tries to make?
The movie's message seems much more optimistic than other existentialist works. Truman's actually able to escape his cooped up world, and he finds out that it's not only meaningless but not even real. He then is able to dictate his own actions and live the life he wanted to, pursue his dreams that he has had ever since he met the girl of his dreams in high school.
Yes, yet most existentialist works are much more depressing. In Kafka's The Metamorphosis, Gregor Samsa, the protagonist, dies alone, and he's abandoned and rejected by his family. Camus' Meursault gets put into jail and given the death penalty. These don't really seem to be giving out the same type of message that The Truman Show does.
Right, but the types of existentialists shown in The Truman Show are not the same as those that are in The Metamorphosis. The Truman Show focuses more on the religious and theistic side of existentialism, where it portrays the producer as the role of God dictating every part of Truman's life.
Interesting. But the God figure does kind of get put aside as Truman chooses to go out and take his chances in the real world rather than stay in the fake TV world, which is what the producer wants him to do. What kind of message do you think that choice sends out?
Well, I think this is Director Peter Weir trying to say that while religious existentialism is a way to cope with the absurdity of life, but it's not like the best method. Mm-hmm. The real way to do it is to go and pursue your own dreams. And that way you find your own method of believing and find what you're meant to do, rather than just going with millions of other people have done.
Wow, that can be considered a pretty blasphemous philosophy, but there you have it. And in both of the movies, the characters are pretty isolated, which is important in Kafka's philosophy. He believes that you have to be isolated to have any sort of meaningful epiphany.
Well, in The Truman Show, Truman is quite isolated when he starts finding out the world is fake. Everyone but him knows that his world is fake, and when he starts realizing as well, he can't get anyone's help because everyone's hired to act as if it's real. He is the only one who has never seen the real world, and he has to discover how to get to it on his own. And he really is isolated and alone in the process because everyone else is trying to keep him isolated, and anyone that could possibly help him, including the girl he fell in love with, is taken away from him immediately.
And how about you, Amy? You've been quiet for a while now. Can you tell us how Harold is isolated?
Well, Harold Crick hears a voice narrating events in his life. He's completely sane, though no one will believe this, because this has never happened to anyone before, and no one else can hear the voice. He is also obsessed with numbers and routine, and he's an IRS agent, so he's rather socially isolated as well.
Yeah, nobody likes the IRS. But Harold isn't completely alone. He gets help from an expert in literature after the narrator tells him about his imminent death.
Well, yes, but the literature expert then concludes that Harold should just continue on with his life, that there's nothing he can do to avoid whatever the narrator plans for him, and he should just do whatever it is he's always wanted to do. Then Harold becomes particularly isolated because no one can tell him what he wants to do with himself. He has to figure that out on his own. Then not only does he hear this voice that no one except the literature expert will believe him about, but he also has to deal with figuring out who he is and who he wants to be, a feat he must face alone, which is exactly what Kafka tried to convey to the world through The Metamorphosis. You must be alone in your quest to discover your identity.
So you think your movie is more similar to Kafka's philosophy than Camus' philosophy?
Yes, there are a few aspects of Camus' absurdism, such as the idea that you shouldn't look for meaning in anything you do, as all of life is absurd. Harold doesn't see the point in finding meaning in his own life. He's content to just live alone and have a job that most people would find abysmal. However, like in Kafka's work, through his isolation and despair, Harold finds meaning in his life. He makes a huge change, and he discovers the passion for guitar, and he falls in love, all after accepting his imminent death. This is all very similar to Kafka's philosophy.
I see. But it seems that Stranger Than Fiction has a happier view than Kafka's pessimistic work. No one dies, and Harold ends up happy. In The Metamorphosis, Gregor dies, and everyone just moves on and is happy that they don't have to deal with him anymore, showing that humanity is selfish and cruel, and that no one really knows who they are or what meaning their lives are supposed to have.
Yes, its message is also more optimistic. Director Mark Foster seems to think that most people are good people. I mean, everyone Harold meets tries to help him, including the psychologist he visits, the literature professor, Miss Pascal, and even the writer of Harold's life herself. I think this more optimistic view has a lot to do with modern society. I mean, when The Stranger and the Metamorphosis were first published, World War II had just ended, so people were understandably more pessimistic.
Yeah, I would agree. Most people generally don't want to think about the idea of nothing really existing or being meaningful. That would just be too depressing for them. But I think Camus would say that they're escaping the idea of absurdity through illusion, which is to not think about it.
Good observation. Maybe we're all just avoiding the idea that life has no meaning. But the meaning of life isn't something we can definitely determine over the episode of a talk show. As Camus would have said, it's something that's different for everyone, and for some people it doesn't even exist. So it's important not to follow other people's idea of the meaning of life, but to create one of our own.
Yeah, and you can't find out who you are just by watching a talk show. As Kafka would have said, there are too many people and distractions around for that.
Right you are, Amy. Well, unfortunately we're out of time. Thank you so much, John and Amy, for joining me tonight.
Well, thanks for having us.
Yeah, totally. Thank you.